This institution dates from 1966. We have in our holdings, and I want to emphasize this because many people are aware of the library, a much larger number, something like 10 to 11,000 a day, come in to see the museum. Many others come to see this wonderful Lutyens Baker Lira garden, which is the largest Baker Lutyens Lira garden other than the Lodi gardens, the whole of which is open to the public. But along with all of these, we also have a very substantial archive of private papers, documents, pamphlets, leaflets, and since there are many among you who have long associations with some of these organizations or groups, if you know people who have pamphlets, leaflets dating back over the last 60 odd years or 40 odd years, please do get in touch with us. 21st Century Maoism in India, Mr. Jairam.
Thank you, Dr. Rangarajan. Friends, I'm delighted to have this opportunity of participating in this public lecture organized by the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, which has undergone a rebirth of sorts after Dr. Rangarajan has taken over. I wish to congratulate him to begin with on the tremendous energy that he has brought to bear to making this organization what it used to be once upon a time, a nerve center of intellectual activity, of diverse political opinions and ideologies, in as diverse a set of disciplines as possible that would do justice to the person after whom it is named. Dr. Rangarajan asked me whether I would, some months ago he asked me whether I would speak on a topic with which I have been immersed in over the last 4 years, which is loosely in the media called the Naxal problem, or the Maoist problem, or the left-wing extremist problem, and what today is advertised as 21st century Maoism. So in the course of the next half an hour, I propose to ask 7 questions and leave you with some tentative answers. Not definitive by any means, but as a beginning to understanding what our Prime Minister has very often described as India's greatest internal security challenge. The 7 questions that I would like to ask. First, what is India's Maoist challenge all about? Second, how are the objectives of the Maoist challenge to be accomplished? Third, where is this challenge most visible? Fourth, who are the foot soldiers of this challenge? 5, why has it grown and why has it assumed the proportions that it has? 6, what are we doing as a government and as civil society to deal with this challenge? And finally, I leave you with thoughts on what I consider to be the missing pieces of our strategy and what needs to be done to deal with this challenge more effectively. So let me begin by asking the basic question. What is India's Maoist challenge all about? And I believe that this challenge is ideological. At its root, at its fundamental, it is an ideological challenge to the very foundation of the Indian nation state. Shorn of all the romanticism that inevitably surrounds any left-wing ideology, I think it's important for us to recognize, through the wealth of evidence that have been accumulating over the years, that this challenge negates the very edifice of parliamentary democracy. This edifice rejects the very structure of parliamentary democracy and constitutional values that we have given ourselves. And this is, at its very core, a challenge to the political system as we understand it and as we have run it over the last 6 decades or more. To my view, therefore, India's Maoist challenge is at its root an ideological challenge. And if we refuse to accept the ideological content of the challenge that we have confronted, I'm afraid our responses are also going to be half-hearted. Of course, over the years, the ideological component has got diluted. And today, as I will explain to you, in large parts of India, which are loosely called Maoist affected, ideology is at a discount and extortion is at a premium. In fact, in many states of the country, you find two types of Maoist challenges. You have an ideology-based Maoist challenge and a levy-based Maoist challenge. A levy means a cut on the development expenditure that is being incurred on the ground, whether it is mining, whether it's roads, whether it's power plants, whether it's dams and so on. But without getting into these finer distinctions, I want to close the first section by saying that this is an ideological challenge that we face. It's a challenge that the entire Indian system of parliamentary democracy is facing. Now, second, how do the proponents of this ideology hope to accomplish their objectives? They hope to accomplish these objectives, as is abundantly clear, not through Gandhian methods, not through ideological debate, not through open contestations at the Nehru Memorial or at any other intellectual watering hole, but they hope to accomplish their objectives by the spread of violence and terror. This much is absolutely clear. This is a guerrilla war challenge that we are facing. And I will explain to you the dimensions of this as I go along. And I think if we do not accept the centrality of violence, if we do not accept the centrality of spreading fear and terror as fundamental instruments of achieving the objectives of this ideology, we would not be understanding what our response should be. The third question, where is the challenge most visible? As Dr. Ramesh mentioned, it started off as a spark somewhere near Bagogra in a small village called Nasalbari, which is today a sleepy little village. And it was an urban uprising. The 70s saw the Maoist challenge in urban areas. Today's Maoist challenge is predominantly, overwhelmingly rural. It's less urban, but it's overwhelmingly, as I said, rural. And where is it visible? What is the geography of this challenge? The geography of this challenge is Central India. And what characterizes this geography? By and large, barring Bihar, Bihar is an exception, as you know, to almost everything that can be said in our country. Barring Bihar, which I'll come to a little later, the geography of this challenge is concentrated in 1. Mineral-rich areas, 2. Forest-rich areas, and 3. Tribal-dominated areas. This is the fundamental geography of this challenge. Now, the Government of India has identified 82 districts. Out of 620 districts, 82 districts are classified as left-wing extremism affected, or Maoist affected, or Naxal affected. 8 of these districts are in Andhra Pradesh. 2 are in Maharashtra. 10 are in Madhya Pradesh. 16 are in Chhattisgarh. 18 are in Odisha, 3 are in Uttar Pradesh, 11 are in Bihar, and 3 are in Israel. Now, you leave Bihar aside for the time being, because that is linked, and almost everything in Bihar is to caste. Everything else, the geography of the challenge that we face in the other parts of India, central India, is related to forests, is related to minerals, and is related to tribal populations. So these are the 82 districts, about 500 to 600 gram panchayats, which are very badly affected on account of the violence and terror that is being spread by these organizations. Fourth, who are the foot soldiers of this movement? Who are these people we are dealing with? The leadership is 99% from Andhra Pradesh. Telugu is the lingua franca of the Maoist leadership. But the foot soldiers are all tribal. There may be exceptions here and there, but the foot soldiers, the majority of the foot soldiers are tribal. And why is it that there is this phenomenon that is taking place where the leadership belongs to one socio-economic and linguistic grouping, but the foot soldiers are coming in from a completely different segment of society? And it is my belief, and it is my conviction, that the foot soldiers are predominantly tribal because of tribal displacement, because of tribal deprivation, because of tribal disconnect, and because of tribal defect. What I call the 4 Ds. And India's Maoist challenge, stripped of all its complexity, is a challenge that we face in dealing with tribal displacement, tribal deprivation, tribal disconnect, and tribal discontent. You address these 4 Ds of tribal society, and you would have gone a long way in addressing the Maoist challenge. 5. Why has this grown? Once upon a time, India's Maoist challenge was confined to 6 or 7 districts: Adilabad, Warangal, Karimnagar, Visakhapatnam, Vijayanagaram, and of course, the famous Srikakulam. These were the 6 districts. In the 70s and 80s, after the demise of the Naxalbari, urban-oriented Naxalbari movement, these were the 6 districts which were the epicenter of Maoist activity. But it has grown today from 6 districts in Andhra Pradesh to 82 districts in 9 states of the country. Why has it grown? That's the 5th question. And to my mind, it has grown because of 3 factors. There are many reasons, and everybody has a hypothesis. But I am trying to communicate to you the essentials of the problem. And to my mind, there are 3 reasons why a phenomenon that was confined to 6 districts of Andhra Pradesh is now a challenge of 82 districts in 9 states of the country. The first and most important reason, in my view, is the political neglect of this issue. And what do I mean by political neglect? No political party in India can afford to neglect the Dalit issue. Dalits are central to electoral fortunes in about 300 constituencies of the country in Lok Sabha elections. No political party can afford to ignore the demands concerns, interests of Dalit communities. No political party, serious political party, can afford to ignore the concerns and interests of Muslim communities. Because Muslim communities, Muslim population, given the demography and geography, sway electoral outcomes in at least 200 constituencies. But look at the tribal communities. No more than 50 constituencies out of 543 where the tribal vote, quote unquote, is central to electoral performance. So political parties do not find it, and here I include all political parties. I'm not speaking here as a representative of one political party. I'm speaking here as a political personality with scholarly pretensions. No political party has found it worthwhile to make tribal issues the mainstream of their political activity the way they have done with Dalit issues or Muslim issues. And this is related to the political economy. Ram Guha has a fascinating piece in EPW some years ago, where he drew attention to the fact, and he's one of the few scholars who has brought attention to this fact, that Dalits and Muslims live with other communities. Whereas the geography of tribal India is tribals live in tribal villages. And that has affected the nature of political mobilization by political parties. So in my view, the political neglect of tribal issues has been the first and important reason why tribal disconnect has grown. Second, and this is going to be a very controversial statement, but I've made this before, and I don't mind repeating it. Mining has led to growing immiserization of tribes. I say this as a member of the ruling establishment. And I have no hesitation in saying that whatever the complexion of the government in the states, or whatever the complexion of the government in the center, tribal areas to policymakers are simply mineral-rich areas. We are more bothered about bauxite, iron ore, coal, than about the people who live on the lands. And it is the nature of mining, ecologically unsustainable and socially devastating, that has caused the tribal disconnect to increase. And by the way, India is not an exception to this. The world over, the poorest regions are mineral-rich regions. In the United States, it's the Appalachian Mountains, which are the mineral-rich areas, which are the poorest regions of the United States. You take the same thing in Russia, take the same thing in Australia. The same phenomenon prevails in China. And clearly in India, the poverty bowl of India is the mineral bowl of India. So there is something in the nature of the extractive industry. There is something in the manner in which the extractive industry operates environmentally and socially that does not lead to prosperity of the locals, but it certainly leads to prosperity of the outsiders, many of whom accumulate vast resources to become members of parliament and members of state legislature. The locals are left in a state of perpetual poverty. So in my view, the manner in which mining has operated in our country, the manner in which neither the public sector nor the private sector has fulfilled its environmental or social obligations as part of mining has led to further and further discontent in tribal areas. And the third important reason why the tribals have become the foot soldiers of the Maoist armies is because of a most insensitive and a rapacious forest administration. The first symbol of the government a tribal sees is the forest guard. And nothing can be more frightening to any human being than a forest guard. Because the forest guard is armed with the Indian Forest Act of 1927, a colonial relic that considers any tribal who goes into a forest area to collect his or her items of daily existence as a criminal. And it is not a surprise that thousands of tribals in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha are in jail on the flimsiest of FIRs filed by the Forest Administration. True, in 2006, the government finally woke up and passed the Forest Rights Act, a most far-reaching piece of legislation. But let me tell you, I've been Forest Minister for 2.5 years, 2 years. The forest bureaucracy did its damnedest to ensure that the Forest Rights Act was not implemented. The greatest opponents of the Forest Rights Act today continue to be the forest bureaucracy. So, the answer to this question, why has tribal disconnect grown? Why has tribal discontent grown to such an extent that they have become willing foot soldiers of a movement committed to violence and terror, lies in these three factors. The demography and geography, which has not made tribal concerns central to political mobilization, the way Dalit mobilization or Muslim mobilization is taking place. Second, the environmentally and socially devastating manner in which mining has taken place, and the consistent lack of fulfillment of safeguards that were enjoined upon the public or the private companies in order to carry out the mining, leading to massive displacement of tribals. Walter Fernandez, a scholar of the Indian Social Institute, now in Guwahati, one of our most meticulous researchers, has estimated that 40% of all people displaced over the last 60 years on account of development projects have been tribals. And he places the number of tribals displaced at anywhere between 10 to 15 million. And I myself have seen large irrigation projects in central India where tribal communities have been subject not to one displacement but to multiple displacements. They've been displaced once, then they've been displaced twice, and then they've been displaced thrice. I myself know in Jharkhand tribals whose land was taken 50 years ago and were still awaiting compensation. So our track record of land acquisition and R&R, where tribals have been displaced, has been pathetic to say the least, and the consequences of that is a tribal community in state after state which has lost confidence and lost faith in the political economy in which we all participate. Now let me come to the sixth question. I've asked, what is India's Maoist challenge? How are you hoping to accomplish their objectives? Third, where is it visible? Fourth, who are its foot soldiers? Fifth, why have these foot soldiers become foot soldiers? Let me now come to the penultimate question that I want to ask, which is, what are we doing about it? What has been our response to this? Well, our response to this, our fundamental response to this, has been to expand our security operations in the area. Our first and instinctive response was to expand the security operations. Today, we have 70,000 paramilitary forces in these 82 districts. And if you add another 30,000 local police, you have 100,000 paramilitary and police personnel. So security has been, rightly so, our first and instinctive response. Because unless you're able to control these areas, you're not going to be able to do anything further which you want to do to deal with this challenge effectively. Over the last couple of years, the limitation of a security-only approach have become evident, and now the approach is a security-plus approach. It's not a security-only approach, it's a security-plus approach. And what is this plus? This plus is development. And therefore, you talk to most people in the States or in the center, and they will tell you that India's answer to the Maoist challenge is a twin answer, is a two-legged answer. One leg, security, and the other leg, development. This has been our response. How far have we succeeded on this twin-track approach? The evidence is still sketchy, the jury is still out. We have had some security successes. Some areas which were quote-unquote considered liberated have become deliberated and come into the mainstream of civilian activity. And some areas where development had simply not been visible over the last 5 or 6 decades are now beginning to see the glimmer of developmental activity. But I do believe that this is the right approach, a sensitive security approach to secure these areas for development, and a development approach that addresses some of the daily needs, some of the basic concerns of local communities who have been deprived of their basic constitutional obligations, whether it's health, housing, education, land, water, some basic developmental issues of social and physical infrastructure. And this is indeed the way to go forward. Let me now turn to the last question. What more needs to be done? This is the real heart of the matter. I don't think there's anybody in this room who would agree that you need a sensitive security approach and a very effective developmental approach. I don't think anybody can argue with this proposition. So what more should we be doing which we are not doing? And that's what I want to focus on. What are those elements of the strategy to deal with this Maoist challenge that we need to adopt? And I believe that the fundamental requirement is a political response. We have a security response, we have a developmental response. What we need is a political response. Where political parties are strong, the Maoist challenge is weak. Where political parties are weak, the Maoist challenge is strong. Where political parties have local structures to accommodate aspirations of local youth, Maoist organizations are not able to recruit. But where political parties are non-existent, or where political parties have closed doors, it's very clear that Maoist organizations have been successful in recruiting alienated, discontented, frustrated youth. And it is the demographics of the Maoist army is very interesting. We are talking of about 15,000 to 20,000 armed guerrilla outfits, 40% of whom at least are women. And the average age is in the high teens and the low 20s. I have a officer who works with me, my private secretary, who was abducted by the Maoists for 10 days, 2 years ago. He was the collector of Malkangiri. And who abducted him? A 14-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, apart from some others. So demographics of this, we have to be very, very watchful of. And it's not a surprise that where schools don't function, where basic infrastructure does not function, where political parties are not active, the Maoist organizations are able to offer their version of Mahatma Gandhi Narega and give 100-day employment on some guaranteed minimum wage, no doubt, to these young boys and girls. So the political dimension of this response is absolutely essential. 2 years ago, I think the then Home Minister, Mr. Jairam, announced in Parliament the beginnings of this political response. He said 3 things, which did not get the attention they deserve for a variety of reasons. He said, do not give up arms, do not give up ideology, and do not disband your cadres, but come for dialogue and talks. Do not give up arms, do not give up your ideology, and do not disband your cadres. We are ready to talk. There was no response. Then, one of the leading lights of the Maoist movement, Comrade Ganapati, gave an interview a couple of months ago. An interview, a very long interview, published in a book by Jan Medars called Red Star over India. And what are the conditions, what are the political conditions that the Maoists want? From the government side, from the establishment side, Mr. Jairam articulated, don't give up arms, don't disband cadres, don't give up your ideology, come for dialogue. Comrade Ganapati, not to be outdone, gave his 3 conditions for his political response. Let me read it out to you. 1. All-out war has to be withdrawn. 2. For any kind of democratic work, the ban on the party and mass organization has to be lifted. This is the CPI Maoist organization. And 3, illegal detention and torture of comrades has to be stopped and immediately released. If these demands are met, Comrade Ganapati goes on, then the same leaders who are released from jails would lead and represent the party in the talks. So here we have a political impasse. The government, speaking for the political establishment as a whole, because I'm sure that these are conditions that are not peculiar to one government, any government would have come up with this, has put up 3 conditions for a political response. The Maoists, on their side, have put up 3 conditions for a political response. So this is a classic case of an immovable object meeting an irresistible force. The net result is no progress forward. But I think it's very, very important for us not to forget that the ultimate solution to the Maoist challenge has to be political. And we have faced such challenges in the past. We defeated militancy in Punjab politically. We defeated insurgency in Mizoram politically. Yesterday's insurgent called Lal Denga became today's chief minister called Lal Denga. We have defeated militancy and insurgency in Tripura politically. Yesterday's agitators, Asu became today's AGP, Prafulla Mahanta and Bruno Fugard. So India has a long track record of converting yesterday's militants, yesterday's insurgents, yesterday's terrorists to today's political leaders. The MP from Palamu, who sits with me in the Lok Sabha, is a former zonal commander of the Naxal army. He decided to come into the mainstream and he is now a member of parliament of the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, Kameshwar Baitwa. So the Indian political system is a giant blotting paper. It can absorb many things. Our system is very flexible. And I think if we demonstrate sagacity and vision, which I think we must, the political route is the route to follow. Political parties will have to increase their visibility and presence in these areas. They will have to ramp up their political mobilization in these areas and show to disaffected and discontented and disconnected youth in these areas that politics and political activity is an alternative route of addressing their grievances than picking up assault weapons or AK-47. The second element of what needs to be done, in my view, is some form of restitution and reconciliation of past injustices. The fact that these injustices have been perpetrated cannot be denied. The fact that lakhs of tribal families have been displaced and not been given adequate compensation or R&R. The fact that thousands of acres of land have been acquired when hundreds of acres of land would have been done. These are all evidence staring us in the face. Any person who goes to Chhattisgarh or Orissa or Jharkhand will come back convinced of the injustices that have been perpetrated in the name of development. And I think it's important for us not to continue to perpetrate these injustices, but also open a window for acknowledging some of these past injustices and effecting some form of restitution. There is a Nagari movement. I don't know how many of you are aware of this movement in Ranchi, where land has been acquired. Land was acquired in 1958 and nothing was done on that land. And today on that piece of land we want to put the symbols of 21st century India. We want to put an IIM there. We want to put a law school there. We want to put all the modern institutions of a superpower India, aspirational India in that land. Nothing wrong with that. But you acquired that land 50 years ago at niggardly compensation. And now, the people in that area are saying, hey, wait a minute, what about giving us compensation at today's rates? Because for 50 years we did not do anything on this land, and we entitled to compensation at today's rates? It's an important question that they have raised. That's what I mean by saying restitution for some of the past injustices that have been perpetrated in the name of development, which has led to large-scale acquisition of land and larger-scale displacement of landowners and landers. And finally, of what needs to be done, I think we need to expand the constituency of peace seekers. Where are the Gandhian organizations in these areas? Who are the civil society activists who are arguing for peace, who are arguing for harmony, who are arguing for a path of civilized discourse and addressing some of the issues that are being raised by the Maoists in order to fulfill their objectives? This cannot be, on the one hand, the guns of the Maoists, and on the other, the guns of the paramilitary forces. The tribal is caught between. So you have to expand the institutional space, the actors, the institutions, and India has no shortage of such activists. But I am struck by the fact, I went to Varna recently, I went to Jairam, and I had a meeting with Gandhian organizations, and I said, look, this is the land of Gandhi, and we are in Varna, and 1.5 hours from Varna is Gadchiroli, which is one of the worst Maoist affected areas in the country. So isn't that a sad reflection on us, on all of us collectively, that here we pay obeisance to Gandhian ideology and Gandhian methods, and just an hour or so from Gandhi's main ashram, in the mid-30s and early 40s, lies Gadchiroli, which is the epicenter of the Maoist movement. I think we need to create track 2, track 3, track 4, track 5, multiple tracks of engagement, so that we can find a viability. If we don't do this, I'm afraid the answer is going to be growing militarization. The answer is going to be growing use of force on both sides. Action, reaction. What happened in Latehar 10 days ago exceeded all norms of civilized behavior, and I'm sure that will create a counter-reaction, and that counter-reaction will then trigger some counter-reaction, and the cycle will go on. So we have to, we are like the proverbial Abhimanyus. We know how to get into the Chakravarti, but we have forgotten how to get out of it. And I think if we want to get out of this conundrum that we are faced in, we have not only to adopt the security approach and the developmental approach, but we also have to give central place, as I say, to a political strategy, a political response on the part of mainstream and local political parties to acknowledge the need for restitution and reconciliation in many cases, and 3, expand the institutional space for other organizations in the government, outside the government, in civil society, to address some of these issues that the Maoists have raised. In conclusion, let me say that while I believe, I'm not a romantic, but I do believe that the Maoist challenge is a very serious ideological challenge, but I do believe that the Maoists have demonstrated their commitment to violence and terror. और मैं एक हिंदी का शब्द इस्तेमाल करूंगा जो लातेहार में उन्होंने दिखाया है, उन्होंने दिखाया है कि उनमें इंसानियत भी नहीं है. But I think the issues that they have raised, willy-nilly, advertently, inadvertently, are issues we cannot ignore. And the great tragedy of our society is that it required the Maoists to wake India up to its tribal predicament. Had there been no violence, had there been no Maoist problem, I can assure you, we would have been smug and complacent about tribal India. Because for us, tribal India exists as a repository of minerals. Nothing else. But we have 80 million tribals in our country. On every indicator, the tribals are at the bottom of the ladder. Education, health, nutrition, sanitation, agricultural productivity. Take any indicator, tribals are at the bottom. And it is a surprise actually that the discontent is not much widespread than it actually is. And that's a tribute in many ways to our system, to our political and social system. But I think the issues that the Maoists have raised, the dimensions that the Maoist challenge has taken, is a wake-up call to our society. And I do hope that we give very serious thought to the governance model, to the economic model that we have adopted in the tribal areas, and look upon tribals as people first, and not as people who have to be displaced so that we can get out more coal, more uranium, more iron ore, more bauxite, more manganese, which are all the raw materials of a fast-growing economy. I think if we recognize this, we will automatically come up with solutions to this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a fascinating lecture. Unless everyone agrees with every word you said, I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions. If I may just pose one at the beginning, you referred in some detail to the Forest Rights Act, but closely related to forest is the question of land. And how far do you think the land acquisition bill addresses these issues? Also, just to reverse the point, sir, if I may, the Adivasis comprise a significant voting bloc in 40 to 50 Lok Sabha seats. But why is it in a time of so-called fractured minority government, coalition